Ebola. It's something we hear about so frequently in the news today, you would think that we would have the knowledge to match it. In tonight's program, we'll be interviewing several experts from different fields and different backgrounds, trying to unravel the mystery of Ebola, and getting a comprehensive look at the virus, from its origins to its effect on other nations across the world, and how it will play a role in American policy today.
Dr. Tiffany Cizik is a leading expert on the history and evolution of the Ebola virus. She has been on the front lines of dealing with Ebola on American soil and is currently a professor at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
So, Tiffany, what can you tell us about Ebola in terms of its background?
Well, the virus first originated in 1976. There were simultaneous outbreaks in the villages of Nazara, Sudan, and Yambuku, all of which are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ebola actually gets its name from Yambuku, as there is a river near that village which is called the Ebola River. It was formerly known as hemorrhagic fever, and it is a severe and often fatal illness in humans with a case fatality rate of 25 to 90%, which isn't very good odds.
No kidding. Now, for those of you at home, what can you tell us about how the virus originated? Did it just come out of midair?
No, definitely not. The origins of the virus are actually traced back to fruit bats as the natural hosts, though after the infection of a human from a wild animal, the virus is transmitted from human to human contact. This can be accomplished through the direct contact of an uninfected human with the blood, secretions, organs, and even surfaces contaminated by the fluids of the infected human.
Wow, so the disease spreads quickly and has a high mortality rate?
Yes, unfortunately, that's what makes the virus so difficult. It also doesn't help that much of the symptoms can be difficult to identify as specific to this virus. The early ones are actually often confused with the flu virus, as they include general maladies like fever, fatigue, muscle pain, headache, and sore throat. However, after about 21 days of infection, the symptoms devolve into vomiting, diarrhea, rash, impaired kidney and liver function, and in some cases, even internal or external bleeding.
Well, despite these almost overwhelming odds, what is being done to stop the spread of this virus?
Currently, there is no official or licensed cure for Ebola, so most treatment is aimed at helping symptoms to improve the chance of survival for an infected patient. There are a range of treatments being tested currently, including blood products, immune therapies, and drug therapies.
Well, that seems pretty doom and gloom. Is there any hope for a cure?
While I said there currently isn't an official cure, it doesn't mean that one isn't on the horizon. We currently do not have any official vaccines, but there are 2 that are currently undergoing human safety testing.
That's good news, at least. Are there any final words you'd like for our viewers tonight?
I would just like to say that as long as you take proper safety precautions and keep track of your symptoms if you find you are at high risk for contracting the virus, you will be fine.
Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Cizik. I truly appreciate it. After speaking with Dr. Cizik, I was curious to how our country's leaders were addressing this pressing issue. To gain further insight, I met with White House correspondent Eric Lee. Mr. Lee, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Eric, what can you tell us about what America's leaders are doing about Ebola today?
Well, Steve, at the moment, the Ebola epidemic is a top national security priority for the United States. President Obama states that in order to help prevent the disease from spreading, the U.S. is partnering with the United Nations as well as other international partners to assist some of the affected African countries like Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone.
Since it's such a pressing issue, do we have a game plan or any goals for addressing the crisis?
Definitely. There are currently 4 main goals to combat and contain the crisis. Firstly, we want to control the epidemic at the source in West Africa. Next is to mitigate the second-order impacts, which include engaging economic, social, and political tolls in the region. Thirdly is to coordinate with a broader global audience. And finally, it is to fortify a global health security infrastructure in the West African region and beyond. Ever since the first cases were reported in March of 2014, the U.S. has applied government action shortly after. This includes contributing more than $175 million, as well as supplying resources throughout these federal governments in response to the crisis.
Anything else the U.S. is doing to help contain and control the issue abroad?
Oh, definitely. The U.S. will also enlist the services of the U.S. military to further help contain the disease. We are also working with the UN, the World Health Organization, the governments of affected countries, and partners as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Norway, the African Union, and the European Union to help address the issue internationally. To date, more than $100 million has been spent towards specialized equipment such as mobile labs, logistics, and relief commodities, as well as support for local health workers. Efforts in combating future epidemics are being set in motion, where the US, as well as other nations across the world, have launched the Global Health Security Agenda, a 5-year plan to respond efficiently to such alarming threats. Over the course of the next 5 years, the US is committed to work with 30 countries to address and advance the GHSA. The CDC and other organizations are working to establish emergency centers, information systems, and strengthening of laboratory security to mitigate biological threats.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you so much for your time and invaluable information. Is there anything else you want to say to your viewers tonight?
Well, the Ebola pandemic only reminds us that it is vital to provide efforts on a global level in order to prevent and rapidly respond to such infectious diseases.
Thank you, Eric.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. After meeting with Dr. Sizek and Mr. Lee, I wanted to learn more about Ebola's effects outside of our own borders. So I met with Dr. Cynthia Jameson. Dr. Cynthia Jameson is a professor of international relations with an emphasis on global health at the University of Chicago. She has played a vital role in assisting with organizations such as the World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders in their quest to manage the spread of Ebola. Dr. Jameson, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I was wondering, what could you tell us about Ebola, its effect on Americans as far as a foreign policy perspective?
Well, Stephen, I can tell you that so far, the discussions of Ebola have revolved around the adequacy of responses to the situation and whether IGOs such as the World Health Organization should have announced a public health emergency of international concern. However, there has been concern regarding the long-term implications of the apparent failure of these states, meaning Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, which needs to be addressed in hopes of preventing disease outbreak in the future.
Interesting. It sounds like a lot of the same old worries of trying to help out countries in need without making it seem like an overhaul of their native governments by outside nations.
Definitely. It's a very sensitive issue because we want to respect the sovereignty of these states while also dealing with the fact that Ebola is a highly contagious and deadly virus, which is spreading from these states at an alarming rate, a rate which is of international concern.
For those of us who may not know, what can you tell us on the background of these countries which have had the highest concentration of the 2014 outbreak?
Yes, well, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia are all Northwest African nations. They have long histories of political unrest and a lack of adequate investment in public health systems. They have been and remain fragile states with unstable political systems. In regard to security implications, so far they have been emphasized at 3 levels: individual, regional, and global.
Would you care to elaborate on those different kinds of concerns?
Surely, individual security is exactly what it sounds like, addressing security issues on an individual basis. To enforce this, measures such as forced quarantine and even banning journalists from investigating or reporting to prevent further outbreak have been enacted by these countries. Secondly, we have regional security. Concerns on a regional level have caused for these countries to have to send away peacekeepers and similar non-medical organizations for their own well-being. And at the global level, the nations themselves have been under concern and scrutiny for their believed neglect of their nation states because of a combination of disease emergency failures in the past, with cases such as the H1N1 swine flu outbreak period and the global financial crisis, which has introduced financial austerity to the sector.
Interesting. As you've been deeply involved with the IGOs working with these nations, what has been your proposal thus far?
Well, the first thing to understand is that the strengthening of the health system is the single most vital step for strengthening global health security in the future. This will require nations to become more deeply involved with the global health security framework to ensure a preventative stance versus the past reactive stances that have been taken.
Okay, before you go, Dr. Jameson, is there anything else you would like to say to our viewers?
From an American foreign policy perspective, we need to think more about utilizing the preventative tools that the World Health Organization and others already possess. Tools which focus on assisting states to fulfill their responsibilities, as well as reducing dependence on the Security Council. Bear in mind, this is the largest and most complex Ebola outbreak since the virus first emerged in 1976. There have been more cases and deaths in this outbreak than in any other combined. It's an issue that needs to be addressed, and addressed now.
Well, we have heard from experts on the virus itself, as well as from people directly coordinating the policies of IGOs and governments involved in this crisis, and yet there still seems to be so much we do not know. We're still in search of a permanent cure, as well as a way to help countries afflicted by the virus develop necessary infrastructure to prevent such an outbreak from happening in the future. However, through diplomacy between nations and intergovernmental organizations, it seems that, for the first time in a long while, we have people coming together to fight a cause bigger than themselves for the ultimate goal of global health, something that I believe we can all agree is a basic human civil right. Thanks for tuning in. Here for Nightly News, I'm Stephen Gerry, signing off.